crypto is bad. Ban crypto.
Cryptos are not securities.
I don't think the regulators will like you very much after those statements.
Our second and last panel for the day, titled Navigating Regulatory Landscapes for Tokenized Assets, Best Practices and Emerging Trends. This panel will be moderated by our amazing moderator, the crypto lawyer, Irina Haver. Please give her a warm round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Guys, let's give her a round of applause, please. Come on, there you go.
Oh, I'm in the wrong stage.
It's okay. Do we have our panelists ready?
Good afternoon, wonderful people. Thank you very much for being here. Regulatory panels are always very exciting. I mean, who would not want to listen to 3 lawyers and a few industry experts talking about the regulations? And I've got my wonderful panelists ready to join us on the stage. My name is Irina Haver. I'm a lawyer based here in Dubai. And as you are aware, a lot of regulations and a lot of regulatory work has been happening in place in the last few months. VARA, Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority of Dubai, has issued virtual assets regulations literally 3 days ago. The federal authority, ESCA, has issued regulations for the crypto space literally 4 weeks ago. So a lot of regulatory work is taking place. And we've got this wonderful panel, and this is exactly what we will talk about. But, of course, focusing on tokenizations in various different industries. And tokenization of real-world assets is a very, very hot topic right now. Because up to date, there was a lot of activities happening in the virtual space, but a lot of real-world businesses and real-world assets need to be tokenized as well. And do you mind introducing yourself? Do you mind starting? Let's start with the introductions.
Yeah, let's start it. I don't mind. I'll do that. So, welcome everyone to the conference. My name is Naveen. Dr. Naveen Singh is the full name, and I'm the CEO and founder of a layer 1 blockchain called Inery. Been in the space now a little bit more than 4 or 5 years, and the whole spectrum has been touched as being the fundamental layer. So having a tokenization, digital assets, a native blockchain, I have kind of touched few parts, and regulations is one of the most important parts. So here we are.
Hi everyone, I'm Konstantinos. I'm a regulatory lawyer. I'm qualified in the UK and in Cyprus. I work for a company called Revolut, where I am the lead counsel for the cryptocurrency product.
Hey everyone, my name is Aléksa, and I'm a DAO and tokenization consultant. I support projects with establishing frameworks for operations, governance, and advise on mitigating legal and compliance risks. And I'm also host of DAO Today podcast, which is a DAO and blockchain educational show with a focus on discussing the regulatory challenges of the industry.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. My name is Adel, Adel Burton with Traders Brawl. My background was in working for the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, where I was involved with issuing licenses for crypto asset firms. And so this was the basis of knowledge that allowed me to pivot into creating my own social media, Web3 social media agency, which is now based in Dubai. And I'm great to be here. I'm glad to be here with all these panelists on this panel. Thank you.
So, Konstantinos, can we start with you? What sort of regulatory developments are happening in the UK and EU? So I just briefly covered what's happening in the Middle East, but UK have not been left behind, right? They're passing a lot of new rulings in that space. Can you give us a quick briefing, please?
Yes, thanks, Irina. That's absolutely true that we see a lot of regulation being introduced in this space. And there is a clear trend towards licensing of all the activities regarding the offering of digital assets. Currently in Europe, cryptocurrency activity is regulated under something called the Fifth Anti-Money Laundering Directive, which only regulates anti-money laundering and terrorist financing in this space. But there is upcoming regulation, which is called MiCA, Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, which creates the first comprehensive framework for the regulation of crypto assets. And it covers anything from licensing, requirements around governance, transparency, consumer protection. The UK is indeed behind in this space. The Treasury, which is the Ministry of Finance in the UK, issued a consultation a couple of weeks ago proposing new rules to regulate this space. So we see a lot of activity in this area. We see regulators looking at each other to try and inform their approach.
Fantastic. Aléksa, would you like to add to that? You're based in EU. Would you like to add to how the new EU regulations will impact tokenizations of real industries?
Well, the latest development when it comes to crypto regulation in the EU is currently largely focused on MiCA, Market in Assets Regulatory Framework. That is basically a uniform legislation across EU. But currently, this version is not addressing tokenized assets specifically. They're rather focused on regulating stable coins, then market integrity, consumer protection, and having more strict AML and KYC requirements. While I largely still the tokenized assets to fall under MiFID rather than MiCA. And I mean, I assume that as the space develops and as we have more use cases of tokenization, that EU will follow with developing the framework.
Yes, I was just talking to a few people from the audience. There is a project out here tokenizing real-world property. I think they're sitting on the stage there. So how would EU regulations, for example, apply specifically to tokenization of properties?
Well, I think like that is regulated as the current in terms of like how do you regulate real estate in general, like any other assets, because blockchain is very innovative yet, and EU is exploring, is going into the direction of how to regulate it, but there aren't any new specific laws that are focused on tokenization of real estate or for any real-world assets so far, since it's, as I mentioned, it will come. However, it's not just in this phase.
The reason I'm mentioning real estate because it's a super hot topic right now in the UAE, in Dubai, where we are located. Several really big developers are looking into that, and they're looking into moving into the space. And Gideon, you're based here in the UAE, specifically with what we see in the markets and what we see with the new regulations coming in. What is your view? How will that impact the real-world industries that we have in the region?
Yes, definitely. I think it's adding more clarity to the situation, because in the UK, because my experience came from the UK, right? If you were to invest in cryptocurrencies, the FCA stance is you have no insurance. There's nobody that will give you any indemnity. There's no lawyer that will back you up if you lose your coins, because you're giving your coins to a crypto exchange, centralized or decentralized, and that is their responsibility because it's not registered as a security. But here in the UAE, that's changing. They're actually acknowledging and actually they're finding a framework to actually register cryptocurrencies as securities. It's coming in, it's not yet there, but it is coming. So this gives you a sense of security, like, hey, I have registered, there's a registration number attached to my security, it's crypto. There will be, I believe, my hope is there will be more clarity, and that way, in future, there will be more adoption. Because look at right now, why is Russia, for example, using crypto to funnel money? Because it's a way, it's a medium of exchange outside sanctions. Right? The dollar, the US dollar owned by CBDC so governments is too much control. So crypto is a way to bypass that, give back control to people like you, and the people, for the people. That's the long-term goal, the long-term vision.
By passing them, giving control to the people, I think this is the opposite of what the regulators want. What about you, Doctor? What do you think about, the current landscape in the region?
So I think, globally, I think the regulations are important so that the fiasco like FTX doesn't happen. But from regulatory point of view, I think if they regulate the centralized exchanges properly, that brings a huge step in the regulations, because it's, as he mentioned before, even if it's a DEX or a centralized exchange, if you have a tokenized asset, then you need to actually kind of list your token so it's freely tradable. And the most important part is in this exchanges. Exchanges have now become, the good exchanges are being very, very conservative on what kind of listings they're going, what kind of tokens they're listing. There have been around a huge amount of delisting happening, but still, there are exchanges which are doing whatever they like. And I think this regulation should start actually from the exchange level and come then the fundamental level of the tokenization. For the safety of the investors, I think regulations are very important. But we have to see that we are in Web 3.0 world, and it's a decentralized world. So we don't want it completely at the mercy of the regulators, but that kills the whole spirit of Web3.
The sound is a little bit bad and it's really echoey. Aléksa, you were correct.
Yeah, can I just...
I'm struggling a little bit to even hear myself.
No worries.
I did not understand the extent of the echo.
Yeah, it happens. I just wanted to add on what you said when it comes to securities and crypto.
Right.
So that's actually the issue that is happening in the States, and cryptos are not securities. Crypto should not be seen as securities. What needs to happen is deregulation to, of course, to protect the consumers and do have certain level of compliance, but not at the cost of decentralization and the space and crypto assets and what they are in their nature and what they're representing. So you mentioned around Russia and sanctions. I mean, the whole point of Bitcoin and decentralized technologies, they cannot be censored because it will be subject to centralization and to centralized platforms and to governments, and this industry is building on as the opposite of it. And the fact, I agree that there needs to be a certain level of compliance. You need to have regulations so we avoid cases such as Thera, such as FTX, such as many, many failures of 2022, but again, not at the cost of destroying crypto. If you look at the states and what the SEC is doing along with the CFTC, so there's the SEC says all cryptos except for Bitcoin are securities, more or less, right? So, but how do you, so the Securities Act comes from 1933, and the Howey test comes from 1946, when blockchain did not exist. So how can you apply a law that was actually a test that was created to address the bonds, stocks, shares, etc.? You buy shares, you buy stocks because you do expect to grow in value, and that has to be regulated. But in order for you to actually be able to invest, you need to pass a certain level of compliance. And crypto just does not fit that category. It cannot be put in the same box as shares, as bonds, as anything alike, because it's different. And if you look at Belgium, what they did, I'm not sure who it was, whether a minister, prime minister, I'm not 100% sure on the title. He said, no, we do not see Ethereum, Bitcoin, or any other cryptos as securities, because they cannot be seen as a securities. They're just not the same type of asset. And if you look at, for example, Gary Gensler did, he said that Ethereum is a security. Why? Because since they moved to proof of stake. However, he also claims that since 45% of nodes are actually based in the US, and that makes the whole network and all the projects building on it under the US jurisdiction. And they want to make each and every project building on Ethereum to deem them as securities. That doesn't make any sense, because the fact is that the nodes are based in the US, it's followed by Germany of 19%. But the fact is, in order for you to be a node or to do anything, you need to have certain means to do so. And the rest of the world just does not, because of the cultural development and other reasons. And if you put, like, what's the point of crypto if you make all cryptos securities? Yes, tokenized assets. Yes, they should fall under securities, or we need to have a different asset class for that, but not put everything in the same box. And if you look at the SEC and what they're doing when it comes to asset tokenization, so they say, well, like, okay, we're okay with tokenizing real estate, but we don't feel as comfortable with gold because, but the gold might disappear, and what happens next, right? Like the house cannot really walk away, but gold can. So there is a lot of discussion going around that, but I'm 100% for regulation, but not at the cost of the industry, the ethos, and the reason why we are here in decentralized space. And if we just do everything the same way as we did in centralization, but bring it on-chain, we did nothing.
I just want to add one thing. The thing that happened with FTX, this has happened on both sides, both on traditional finance and in crypto. The person who was managing FTX didn't even have an accounting department. There were flaws with him. Sam Bankman-Fried gave this persona of a benevolent super leader because he went to Harvard, he studied physics, he's in these shorts, he had these long hair, so people have a nice vibe to him. But really, what was and also he bailed out the likes of BlockFi. So lots of benevolence came from the fact that he bailed out companies that went under. But really, deep down, he himself was a troubled person, and he didn't have the managerial skills. This can happen on both sides, crypto or non-crypto. If your mind is not right, it's not a crypto thing. It's a personality thing. It's a leadership thing. So to take one bad apple and say crypto is bad, ban crypto, that's just wrong. That's, in my opinion, there are bad apples.
But that's not. Failure of FTX is not crypto. It's the failure of regulators because they failed to implement existing regulations. Because centralized exchange falls under is a centralized platform that needs to follow certain rules. So, like that 8 billion gap that came up all of a sudden didn't happen overnight. And if you looked at the Congress hearing, like that has been going on for years. Like the regulators that were actually supposed to monitor that, they did not, and later on we learned why, because they were on the FTX payroll. So again, that was not failure of crypto, that was not failure of DeFi, because FTX is not DeFi. And the FTX had the role of a centralized platform that was holding cryptos, but that's not crypto's fault, and it's not the industry's fault.
Exactly, so we're on the same side.
I don't think we can argue that the failure of FTX, which was a criminal enterprise, is a failure of crypto. I don't think anybody argues that in their sane mind. Also, at the same time, we were just talking how regulations are important to prevent things like FTX happening. However, if somebody wants to commit a crime, they will commit a crime, irrespective of the rules and regulations. And I'm sure the audience will agree with that. Konstantinos, talking about more of the bad apples in the industry, how can regulations be used to prevent those criminal enterprises from happening?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you say. Nobody would argue that what happened with FTX is a failure of crypto. It's more about the lack of a framework to ensure a level playing field, if you want, where everyone has to abide by a specific set of rules. So one could even argue that it's a failure of regulation, in effect. How can you ensure that this doesn't happen again? Well, it's exactly the requirements that we see in the regulations on Navarra, we see in the proposed framework by the Treasury in the UK, or in the EU under MiCA. Strict transparency requirements, audit requirements, governance requirements, fitness and propriety for senior management staff of these players, as well as rules around the custody of crypto assets. Because one of the main issues we see now is that when the terms and conditions of the FTX main trading entity were suggesting that the title to the crypto assets belongs to the customer, that's not what was happening in reality, and FTX was actually using customer assets. So I think it's very important that there is a comprehensive set of rules where everyone has to abide by and ensures consumer protection at the end of the day. Even if I could add to what you've been discussing before around the registration of securities, I think taking a step back and cutting out all of the technicalities and all the noise, the requirement for registration is essentially a requirement for consumer protection. So what do these Securities Act in the US say is you need to disclose all of the risks, you need to make sure that the average consumer who puts money into your product or security has a good understanding so that they can make an informed decision within the risk appetite.
But MiCA is doing precisely that.
Yeah.
Right, so and they're not registering everything as a securities, right? So what they are doing, they are addressing the market integrity, meaning that let's say the dump and pump schemes that are like omnipresent in the industry. So let's say that a project is actually paying for AMM or any other type of activities in order to showcase like that the price. They need to disclose that. So they need to make that publicly available, that they're actually employing an AMM, that there is a pump and dump going on, and that like each and every consumer or a potential buyer has to be aware of it as well. So they're ensuring the full transparency. Also, they're regulating as well the crypto asset providers. So there are certain rules and requirements that they will have to follow. And when it comes to stable coins, what MiCA is doing is addressing the issue that we had with Era, right? So if you're issuing a stable coin, let's say if you issue 1 billion of a stable coin, you have to have the same amount of it in the bank. So in case it fails, you're covered and you can pay out the consumers, and there are no issues and so many people losing the money as it happened. And but they're not registering them as securities, and that's the whole point, right? So MiCA has many good sides, it has some negative, of course, but it's the first draft, and it will evolve with time, and this is MiCA 1, they're voting it hopefully this time in April. There will come MiCA 2.0, they might even address DAOs as well, but the regulation is happening, but they're supporting the innovation. Well, the SEC is not doing that. Like, you cannot KYC each and every holder. I do agree that there needs to be, like, if I'm a founder in the States, and if I'm launching the project, like, of course, the people and the consumers and whoever should be aware that there is a place they can go to in case I rug the project. But that doesn't mean that my identity needs to be fully known, because the fact is that there are crazy people in communities. I have had cases where you literally had some situations for police and for law enforcement and for court because of some community members. And the founder's identity was known.
I don't think anybody would argue that SEC is the regulator we should be learning from and that they're doing a great job. I don't think anybody in their sane mind thinks that. I think they're making a lot of mistakes, and hopefully other regulators in other jurisdictions will not make the same mistakes. What do you think? Are you a fan of SEC and their wonderful work?
Well, I don't want to have any comment on that, but the thing is, all regulators, my question is, why do we need regulator? It's a fundamental question in which I would let everybody jump in. I think the major role of a regulator should be that all the audience and all the people like us who are a part of this ecosystem, that our investment is safe. If they do it properly, the adoption of crypto is going to be 1,000 times more in coming next few years. I think that's the sole purpose. Now, I don't think any regulator in the world is capable of, as you said, pinpointing the pump and dump of different tokens, of different digital assets, taking real-time monitoring of them. I don't think they can do that. They don't have the man-force, they don't have the technical capability. But the beauty of Web3 is that the whole industry is self-regulatory. You know, we people, we part of it, we regulate it. If there is some scheme happening on a bigger level, you can see tweet and Twitter exploding with the things where people actually follow from wallet to wallet where the digital assets have been transformed, how the price has been pumped and dumped. So the self-regulation which is in this industry is phenomenal. But at the other side, for normal people who have this barrier of knowledge to come in the crypto space or digital asset space, they need some kind of assurance, which they don't have. And that's where regulators come in. Instead of going deeply into what is securities and what is utility and what is the token, which is, I don't know, we can discuss about it a lot, but I am a guy who always wants to come on the base, on the fundamentals of the issue, and I think regulators should make sure that the tokens which are listed on big centralized exchange are real, which is again self-regulatory. A normal token cannot be listed on tier 1 exchanges. It's very, very tough. They have their own due diligence process and they have all things. Decentralized exchange is a completely different thing. But I think the sole purpose should be that if anybody of the audience wants to invest X, Y amount of fiat into crypto, that his investment is safe. And I think that should start from the fundamental level, and that should be the sole purpose of the regulatory. Otherwise, they will just lose track. As you said, they will make a lot of mistakes because they technically are not capable of doing that.
Let's switch the gears a little bit. Let's pick an industry, and whichever one you like, and let's talk through the regulatory steps of tokenizing a particular imaginary asset. Konstantin, do you want to do you want to start?
Yeah, I think again we can draw quite an interesting example from what is happening in the EU at the moment. So there is something called the DLTE Digital Pilot Scheme, which is an attempt by the European Union, by the Commission, to utilize distributed ledger technology for the purposes of securities transactions. So, for example, things like a bonds issuance, without the need to use traditional intermediaries. So in a traditional securities issuance, you would have, for example, your issuer, your centralized counterparty who will be a custodian of the securities, and this is all happening on the blockchain, obviously subject to certain limitations and controls. And I think it's an interesting application to see how traditional finance can operate on the blockchain.
Gideon, do you have a great example.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to add was from the regulation side. I don't know if this was mentioned, but proof of reserves and proof of liabilities is also another thing that's actually being taken action by centralized exchanges. So to show that how much money is in the bank account, or is in the balance sheet, for example, that is being disclosed. But one thing to mention is if you only show proof of reserves and you're not showing proof of liabilities, that's only one half of the story. So you need to show both, and that is still subject to speculation, and I suppose subject to more progression from centralized exchanges. Industry of property, for example, I know in the UK property is not regulated by the FCA at least, but when it comes to property being tokenized, like say for example this is a house and you split it up into multiple shares, and you convert those into NFTs and then you sell those NFTs. I don't know, the way that it is managed, the fund manager behind that, this should be under asset management because you're allocating a share into the form of an NFT into individual investors. And that needs, I think more regulation needs to be just making sure that the investor, consumer protection that you mentioned, the consumer or the investor is protected in the form of an NFT. So yeah.
Aléksa, do you have an industry that you quite love for the tokenization?
Well, I think that different regulations apply when it comes to tokenizing different assets, right? So I think one type of regulations would apply, or law, when you're, for example, tokenizing real estate, while the other is when you're tokenizing art or when you're tokenizing health data, right? So it's different. If you're tokenizing health data, you would really want to pay attention more to privacy issues, for example. What happened in Germany and Switzerland, they did a survey, and basically what they said, like, would you feel comfortable sharing your health data and your medical history for research purposes? And a good portion of the responders said, yes, we would, in exchange for, I don't know, getting a premium or a discount on the insurance. And while in Germany, for example, they said, yes, we would be for, however, we would want to choose who that information is shared with. And what's happening a lot is that generally the personal information is not protected, even though it's protected by the law, but we've been seeing many failing. And sharing medical history and medical records in form of, like if you're tokenizing, you have to have really strict privacy concerns there, and you really need to carefully address them, especially if you're selling people's information to industries or to companies to actually to use that either for research purposes or for even selling purposes, because that's the whole point of tokenizing the data. Another use case of tokenization of health data is you can access your full medical history wherever you go, and also that is kept only private with you. However, there is a moment where you need to share that data with your doctor or with whoever who needs to know that. So what laws and what protections are applying in that case? When it comes to real estate, generally real estate is tokenized by not necessarily only NFTs. It's because it can be one type of, while you can also have a different application of tokenization when you have actual digital tokens where you can fractionalize the property, so you open a bigger pool of investors. And in that case, yes, for sure, you want to have stricter regulations because you're investing money in that real estate, and of course, you expect some return, and in case you want to sell it on the secondary market, you need to have that proof that you own that particular token and that part and that piece of that house or an apartment, doesn't matter. When it comes to art, right? So there are different things that you need to take into account, right? So there can be also copyright, trademark, IP, depending on what's being tokenized. So I don't think there is one regulation that fits them all and answers them all the questions. It's rather on the industry by industry basis.
Absolutely. Do we have any projects in the industry, in the audience, that are tokenizing real-world assets and struggling with the regulations across the world or enjoying the regulations across the world?
Guys, wake up. We are waiting for your questions.
Don't be shy.
One project? No? Oh, here. There's a project. What are you tokenizing? Just 2 seconds.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Vlad. We are building Islamic coin. Haq blockchain is the first Sharia compliant blockchain with fatwa from top Muslim scholars. And as you know, due to Sharia compliance, one of the best types of money is actually physical gold. Only tangible assets, they cost something in the Muslim world, and we are now trying to approach physical gold tokenization on the blockchain, such
Fantastic.
that there will be a gold token fully asset-backed by physical gold, which will then can be exchanged into this coin and vice versa.
Fantastic. So tokenization of commodities, a great use case. Thank you very much. Anybody else tokenizing anything fun? Just shout out. Money. Honey. Tokenization of honey. How cool is that? Another useful case. I think we are out of time. The organizers signaling for us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Sorry to interrupt. You can take one question, just one question if there is.
One question.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got time for one question.
Any
which is
questions?
great.
No? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for our amazing panelists and moderator. Thank you very much for sharing all of your thoughts and insights, ladies and gentlemen.